First of all, thank you everybody for being here. I know it's the last day and right before lunchtime. And so, as a token of appreciation, we are going to give out an Apple Watch to somebody who's in the attendance here today. So, again, thank you. And I'll pass it on to Z. He's going to talk about false confidence, real risk of IoT devices in healthcare space. Throughout the event, many of you may have heard about, and I think majority of us learned about what happens inside the hospital. There are a lot of solutions out on the floor. They're really about delivering better care for patients within a hospital and securing those solutions as well. But what happens when patient leaves and goes to home? Imagine a CPAP machine or a rhythm monitoring machine or a medical device watch. You have hundreds of thousands of medical patient care devices outside of the premises of a hospital or a caregiving facility. And what do we do to secure them? So that's the specific core area of topic of conversation that we want to have with individuals, and that's what Z will be covering today. Z.
Thank you very much, Ritesh. Folks, just a few seconds on who maybe a little more than that, but who I am. Founder of a company that does cellular IoT data transport globally, worldwide. 190 plus countries, and we have customers all over the world, some of whom are local to that country and some of whom are providing applications and solutions to multiple countries. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the medical IoT space, which we've been focusing on for a number of years. First of all, let me give you a little bit of information that you will be able to appreciate what's happening out there in the medical IoT space. One is that the implementation of smart medical devices and the data from these smart medical devices is growing at an absolutely exponential rate. And I'll show you some information about that very quickly. What it's designed for is to advance the whole concept of patient engagement, and in particular, engagement outside a hospital HDO facility. It's typically for devices that are remote, and basically improve healthcare delivery. Cellular IoT, which many of you may be wondering, why is that getting a attention in the medical IoT space? And the answer is that traditionally many of the medical devices have been Bluetooth or something else. Some other technology has been used for transport, but what's happening is that the amount of data, the ability to have a transparent system that just works wherever you are. We've had companies come to us in the medical IoT space who had a Wi-Fi application already, and they discovered that the effort to support a patient at home, to implement all of the necessary pass-throughs through the home ISP, if they had one, was painful. Solutions from our cellular IoT are plug and play. They didn't even have to think about it. They just plug it into the wall, the patient gets the data, and the sensor reads the data, and the data is transmitted as necessary. I was going to spend a fair amount of time talking about AI, but I spent some walking time over here, and I think AI is sort of the buzzword of the day in the medical IoT space, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, except to point out that it isn't just for ransomware attacks, which seems to be the focus where the increased sophistication is occurring. Attacks for medical IoT devices outside of just the traditional, so to speak, ransomware attacks is increasing. The sophistication, the same tools that you can see for your data analytics are available to the threat attackers. There was a study done, and obviously I'm not expecting you to read that citation. If you want a copy of this presentation, please contact us and we'll get you that information. Was a study done about a year ago where they looked for medical IoT device vulnerabilities. And they discovered in just the limited set of things that they looked at back in 2023, more than 200 medical IoT devices had vulnerabilities. The introduction of these devices, because people are rapidly introducing new solutions into the market without thinking about the side effects of what lack of security can do for you, is a big deal. And that's where we come into play. Let's look at the healthcare data explosion that is taking place. In this study that was done by, actually it was a RBC Capital Markets, a gentleman reported that in the past 7 years, from 2018 to 2025, healthcare data grew at a 36% compounded annual growth rate, way more than other IoT applications. That's dramatic. If you look at the number of digital data device interactions that are taking place from medical devices, it's also growing quite dramatically. In 2025, about 5,000 device interactions per day. Now, not all of that is constantly happening from these medical devices out there. Some of that includes the patient data that's coming from hospitals, et cetera, but it's enormous. And data is growing very rapidly, so the use of cellular IoT in remote medical IoT devices is growing rapidly because you cannot assume that Bluetooth or some of these other technologies will sufficiently provide you the capabilities necessary for cellular IoT, that cellular IoT can do a better job at. As a result, you need to protect these solutions. So let's talk about what's happening. Why are people attacking these medical IoT devices? They're easy targets. Devices are naturally assumed by most people to be secure. And if they don't have the security necessary, you're going to have a problem. And organizations that are implementing these solutions tend not to understand that the attack surface has been growing so dramatically for these remote devices, and now these devices are more accessible on the internet. A big problem. One of the things that's also important is that the older hardware that has been out there for a number of years may be battery powered, may have low power capabilities. Maybe they didn't have the functionality, the capability of implementing security solutions like encryption or something sophisticated to prevent the data from being an issue. And in many cases, the whole concept of security by design was not followed. Early days, get to market quickly, didn't implement basic security. And unfortunately, what's been happening is that when you do have a breach, you end up typically having to replace the devices out there. That can be incredibly expensive. Now, the statistics are deeply concerning. I'm not expecting to be able to read this from the back. Please do contact us and we'll give you a copy of this presentation. What we see being reported in the medical area alone, IoT is a huge space, in the medical area alone, is that 61% of the healthcare delivery organizations have experienced cyber attacks on their IoT devices, infusion pumps, patient monitors, et cetera. I'm not going to go through all of these, but the fact is that medical IoT is a space where what is happening, sometimes invisible to you, is a big deal. And that's what we're very concerned about. And when you have patient safety that you need to be concerned about, the data is not just the problem. You could have a control of a medical IoT device that causes patient harm. And that's when you need to start really getting concerned about what's happening out there. Some more statistics. Here's the big point. The first one over there right now says 82% of healthcare organizations have reported that they have outdated IoT devices, things that aren't secure. And obviously, and you'll hear this from everybody, the threat attackers aren't standing still. They're evolving rapidly, sometimes way faster than the traditional security blocking mechanisms can take that into account. And so you have exposure in ways that you may not realize. These IoT devices may not be updatable. They're out there, and so you need to have something that may be a solution, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, that allows these older devices to get effective security controls on them. All of these statistics are clear. They're there. You've seen many of them out today in the sessions that have taken place in the various booths over here, as well as the sessions that have occurred for the presentations. The statistics are real. So what's the bottom line, okay? A company called Verity put together a report for the state of the healthcare cybersecurity in 2025, where they said the healthcare industry as a whole is, I'm going to read this one because I think it's very important, is poised to face intensified cybersecurity challenges this year. You don't have any time to waste. Driven by an increasing reliance on IoT devices, technologies, AI technologies, and cloud-based solutions. Organizations must focus on addressing IoT vulnerabilities. You have no choice. You cannot ignore this issue. I'm going to give you a few small reality checks. If you want more information, we are literally 10, 20 feet away in our stand. Come talk to us and you'll understand what the reality checks of these kinds of issues can be. One is, oh, I've got a firewall. I don't need to worry about security. And the answer is, they will not stop compromised IoT devices from phoning because the data may not be coming through your own internal networks. The devices are remote. They're coming through a carrier potentially. They're going off into spaces that you don't have any control or visibility on. And that's incredibly important because if you don't have visibility, what good's a firewall? It's not going to help you do anything. IoT devices are being used as backdoors. Once they breach a device, if it happens to be internal to your network or the data comes into your network, they can move sideways in a hurry. Traditional IT security doesn't take that into account. So you got to worry about that stuff. Keep in mind that anomalous traffic from an IoT device that you may or may not see isn't just, quote, suspicious. What I mean by anomalous, it's not the kind of device, it's not the kind of data that a device should be sending, right? It's often a sign of compromise. You have 1,000, 10,000, maybe a few 100,000 devices out there, and all of a sudden, some small subset is sending data that they never sent before. The patterns are changing, and it's going to destinations that you've never seen before. If you don't know that is happening, if you haven't monitored what's happening with your devices, now you've got a potential compromise that you're not even aware of, and that can hurt you later on. The cost of repair can be enormous. And these are just some stats, and I'm sure you'll hear this from everybody else. The average cost of a data breach for healthcare organizations is in the millions of dollars, $3.5 million. This was from this one site that I found this information from, and we actually have data that shows it can be even higher than that. Average cost per exposed record, okay, privacy as opposed to anything else, close to $400. This is expensive. This is real information, real data, real devices that you need to have secured. So what are your solution requirements that you should be looking at, okay? You've got to make sure that your devices are as secure as you can make them. You need to establish a foundation, identify the risks that matter to you, that matter to your application, that matter to your medical device application. How do you mitigate if it has been compromised? And the analysis of the data to even recognize that you may have been compromised. So you got to start by creating an accurate inventory. What do I have on my network? What do I have outside my network? What's in multiple countries, maybe in remote locations that you don't traditionally have access to? Figure out which devices are critical. If they get compromised, where does the risk come in? And of course, no device should ever be unsecured or unmanaged. If you have an unsecured device and an unmanaged device, it's a target. It's an opportunity for an attacker. Analyze in real time. Now, there are a number of things that this makes a difference about, an important difference about this, which is that if you don't have real-time awareness, you may not realize that you may have been exposed for a long, long time, and some of the new regulatory issues may bite you. And I mean by regulatory issues, fines because you haven't been watching out for security concerns. You got to get metrics, and you have to proactively respond to vulnerabilities potentially before it is 1 or 10 or 10,000 devices or 100,000 devices that have been exploited. And of course, if your IoT security allows you to integrate what you're trying to do for the medical, your traditional IT security, allows you to integrate what you're doing for the medical securities, you have to comprehensively manage the security risks. So your requirements have to match what you expect to have happen from a risk identification, mitigation, and analysis perspective. I'm not going to be able to go through all these questions, obviously. There are some key questions you need to ask yourself. Does your solution you're looking at manage and secure all of the cellular devices that are in your network, whether it's IoT remote or internal to your environment? Again, how does it ensure compatibility across all devices? And a very important one, existing and new devices without requiring agents. Because if you have to go out and touch a device, that's going to be incredibly expensive. If you've already deployed units out there, you want to be able to secure them, you need agentless solutions, and that's very important. How do you get continuous monitoring? How do you get reports? Many of these regulations are now asking for compliance reports, and you've got to have that information literally at the tip of your fingers, because some of these requirements have very short deadlines. You have to report breaches within 24 hours under certain regulations that are coming into play. Bottom line is, find out what requirements and questions matter to you, and then use those to investigate the solution that you want. Very important to keep that in mind. Then, if you're doing a new device, make sure that your security solutions are in context. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. IoT is a huge space. You may have simple sensor data, like on the left-hand side of that I show over here. Whoops, I went too far. That I show over here, wrong button. That may not matter. right? You may have a few pieces of equipment out there that is providing you information that doesn't matter if it's breached or not, maybe. On the other hand, on the right-hand side, you could have national infrastructure, critical infrastructure that may be a big deal. Medical devices fall on the right-hand side of that image. You're going to impact people, and that's what matters. You may have a few people that get affected if you only have a few devices that are taken over, but you could also have a lot of people being affected. Patient safety is important. So in the grand scheme of IoT solutions, medical devices sort of falls on the more important, more critical aspect of making sure that your solution, your application, the network that you're choosing to run your data on, your monitoring capabilities is done right. Very important. Now, what we have done is created a solution. It is quite literally the first cellular IoT solution that's comprehensive. We provide zero trust capability for the cellular IoT domain. Now, if the data is not flowing through us, Watchtower, our IoT Watchtower solution obviously will not apply. If it's a Wi-Fi solution or a Bluetooth solution, it has its own independent risk mechanisms. We get it. But like I mentioned earlier, cellular IoT is increasing in use. And when you use cellular IoT, this capability allows you to continuously monitor. You get real-time surveillance per device, very granular, per application, per enterprise, location, and you can break it down by region. Problems are happening in Germany, but not in Italy. You have extreme granularity of the information, and that's important because it may just take a few handful of devices to cause you a regulatory violation or a compliance violation. It may just take a few devices where you compromise the patient. That's what you want to avoid. Reporting. If you get a compliance request from a regulatory body, you have to respond in time. Very important to keep that in mind. And of course, integration. How do you get your existing infrastructure? How do you minimize the amount of effort and time and money it takes to get a solution to happen? That's what we've put together as a cellular IoT solution. And again, as I mentioned, our stand is right next to us. Come talk to us and we can give you examples, show you what the information looks like. We've already helped customers find out information about their devices on the network that they didn't know was a problem. Breached devices, data being sent to places that they had no clue had happened. Vulnerability, device vulnerability is obviously important. You have to have a zero trust solution for these devices. You have to monitor the traffic. If you have suspicious, anomalous, and malicious traffic, find it in real time. You need to figure out where that device is, find the destination of where that data is going, and the volume. IoT devices don't suddenly start sending 10 kilobytes of data when they were sending 1, or if they start sending hundreds of megabytes of data when they were sending 100 kilobytes on a daily basis. Patterns don't change, and we can help you recognize that. So the benefits is very important here. All kinds of devices that come through our network, the data can be looked at, the destination can be looked at, agentless monitoring. If you have existing devices that are already out there, we can help secure them. Minimize the attack surface. You've got to make sure that the known vulnerabilities are taken into account so you can monitor for that kind of transport that might be occurring. And the traditional problem, and this is the one that we've been able to say, lots of unexpected traffic to a destination you didn't expect. Device should have been going to your server in your cloud application, and all of a sudden it's sending data to a different country. Whoa, wait a minute, what happened? You will not see it. Our system will. We have a core network that allows us to understand the destination of these cellular IoT solutions. Patient safety. This is the real reason you're doing these medical IoT devices to begin with. You want to make sure these things continue to work properly. You don't want tampering. You don't want to have a malfunction that could jeopardize the patient. And you want to have real-time monitoring. You really want to make sure that you capture the problems before they get out of scale. When a security device has a flaw, it means you may well have that flaw in all of the devices in your application, and you want to try and tackle it well before it goes to the point where the replacement option of mitigation doesn't come into play, because that can be incredibly expensive. If you have data that's malicious, block it. Don't want the devices that are not compromised to be blocked. And of course, competition, right? You want to make sure your devices are doing the job that they need to do in a secure way. Regulations. I'm sure you've attended all of the sessions that took place on I hope you did. I attended one yesterday from a regulator in Europe it was from the Ministry of Health in the Netherlands that said, we're working on these regulations, and they're changing and evolving all the time. These are affecting IoT device security, and the biggest issue from any of these regulations is that if you do not comply with them, there's some tremendous financial penalties and legal repercussions that could occur, let alone the fact that your devices are not providing the patient care and the data that you needed to have from that application. You've got to enforce the compliance. It is not good enough to say, my devices are okay. You have to prove that you're compliant. You have to make sure that you have audits responses. Somebody could come in from a regulator and say, I want to audit what you're doing. I want to see how well your devices are protected. Make sure you can provide that data to them. So essentially, you're going to provide faster self-service response to the actual incident, plus be able to report to the regulators. For example, in Europe, there are a couple of new things that I learned about yesterday that frankly I wasn't aware. The CRA, the Cyber Resiliency Act, is very important because any medical IoT device that's out there is going to be affected by that particular act. And when I say act, it's not a directive that any country can choose to have a different implementation. The act is Europe-wide. That's a big deal. And the financial penalties are horrendous. You may have a few thousand devices in one country, you have a breach and you don't comply with the act, lo and behold, 2.5% of your global annual revenue could be the fine. Now, that's an extreme measure, but it's there, and you got to worry about this. So finally, I'm going to close with a slide on who we are by the numbers so you understand that we haven't just been doing this since yesterday. I'm one of the founders of the company. I celebrated my 29th year in January. We have been doing IoT for a long, long time. We understand what it takes to make sure your devices are safe, secure, et cetera, out there. We currently, our connectivity network and our security solution is available to 30 large mobile carriers around the world. Swisscom is a customer of ours. Their IoT solution is actually us providing them the solution. We have 50 vehicle OEMs on our network monitoring their connected cars. We have 7,000 enterprises. We work business to business. We have nearly 7,000 enterprises on our network. 21 million connected vehicles, 80 million. That number has actually changed. It goes up dramatically all the time. We're nearly 90 million devices, cellular IoT devices around the world. And of course, 41 million eSIMs. eSIMs is a technology that is being used more and more for improved manufacturing at scale. So I'm going to basically leave my information up on the screen over here. Please send us email if you'd like a copy of this presentation or any of the details. And I think I have time for a few questions, but before that, Ritesh.
Thank you, Z. I'll hand this over to you. So we've selected somebody who will be receiving the Apple Watch from us today, and the person is, her name is Sherry. If there's a Sarah. All right, come on over. Z, why don't you stand over here? Yeah. And then, Andrew, if you don't mind just taking a picture quickly. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And we'll open up for questions now.
Any questions, anybody? Or okay, that's fine. I will encourage you to please contact us. We're literally 20 feet away on our stand, and there are folks there who can show you real-time information on what's happening on our network, quite literally on the devices we're already monitoring, let alone the ones we expect to monitor in the future. And thank you very much. This is the final day of the event. I'm glad you could make it over here. Truly appreciate your attendance. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.